Hello and welcome to Martial Art Explorations. For some reason in 2020 people are still talking about martial arts styles, as if there's one true style or one better style, and if you just do that, you'll get good at fighting and you'll beat all the other styles, and you'll beat the other stylists, and it's just kind of like a Pokemon game, like you gotta find the water that beats someone's fire, or you gotta find the electricity that beats someone's grass, or whatever type. I don't know that much about Pokemon really, but it's something like that. I urge you instead to think about systems of combat and methods of training. So usually when people talk about martial arts, they're talking about unarmed combat. Occasionally with weapons, and usually with weapons, people are talking about things like sticks and swords and stuff like that. Martial arts is a little more than that, but okay, for today, let's talk about unarmed combat. Suppose you had the perfect, well-rounded martial artist, and that martial artist was never surprised by a move that someone else did to them in a fight, with no weapons. That person had a huge range of attacks and defense. They're well-rounded in unarmed combat, whether it's on their feet or close or far on your feet, or in the clinch, or in a scramble, or on the ground fighting. And let's put that at 100%, okay? And then 0% is, you don't know anything or you can't do anything in terms of unarmed combat. Let's take something specific like boxing. Boxers get very good, specialize in punching, but it's not just punching, it's also defense against punches, it's movement, it's timing, it's rhythm, it's speed, it's cardio, a lot of stuff. So boxers are potentially very good fighters. If you get good at boxing, you'll be good at fighting. It doesn't mean you'll be a well-rounded martial artist for unarmed combat, but you can be very good at fighting. And yet, if our goal is to be a well-rounded martial artist, we don't want to be surprised by a wrestler who takes us down. We don't want to get thrown by a judo person. We don't want to get our arms snapped by a jiu-jitsu person, and so on. Don't want to be kicked by a Muay Thai or Taekwondo person, so on and so on. So I'd place boxing at maybe 55 or 60%, and that's just, it's not a scientific number, for illustration purposes. Similarly, for wrestling, they get good at really specific stuff. You can be a good fighter in unarmed combat if you're a wrestler, and yet it's not well-rounded, okay? It's maybe, again, 55, 60% of the way there if you want to be a well-rounded martial artist for unarmed combat. Muay Thai I'd put a little further towards 100%, but still not much further, 60, 65%. Why? You have more strikes than in boxing, so you'll be aware of more potential attacks, and you have the clinch, stand-up, grappling, stand-up, which can lead to strikes in the clinch and close range. You have sweeps and trips and stuff like that, and yet it's still not complete, so I'd put it maybe 65%. Muay Thai doesn't defend against wrestling takedowns, it doesn't defend against judo throws, it doesn't defend against ground fighting, which is a huge part of combat, unarmed combat for a martial artist. I'd say the closest we have these days, that is commonly known anyways, is what we call MMA. You become a very broad martial artist. You might specialize in one thing, but you also expand your knowledge and skills to almost everything. The rules of MMA exist, but there's not a whole lot of stuff that you can't do in MMA. And so you have to be ready for a lot of different things. And there's a lot of different ways you can attack and a lot of different ways to defend. So you become quite well-rounded of a martial artist if you're training MMA specifically. So I'd place that 80-85% of the way to 100. And it's kind of similar if you train different systems, like if you train Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for example, that makes up for a lot of what you don't practice in Muay Thai. You don't defend against wrestling takedowns, you don't defend against throws and ground fighting. Yet, if you do Jiu-Jitsu in addition to Muay Thai, you expand your base, and you become a more well-rounded martial artist. So maybe you're up to 75-80% or something like that. And, take any combination of systems that we have, and you can closer approach that, ideal of being a well-rounded martial artist in unarmed combat. Now, why is MMA and a mix of all these systems, which usually have a heavy combat sport element, why is that, only 80-85%, not 100? Well, there is stuff that's off limits, even when you mix all those systems and the training methods. Even in the Octagon, the UFC, there are things you can't do that theoretically you could do in a fight in unarmed combat. And if you only trained those other things, you'd have a very incomplete system. Like if you trained eye pokes only and like groin kicks and stuff like that, you'd have a very incomplete system, like 20% or something. But those things are things that you could do potentially in unarmed combat, and you need to be aware of them and at least, try them out and incorporate them somehow into your knowledge. So the way I see it, 100% is just a theoretical, metaphorical thing. It's never really reached. You're never totally aware of every possibility of attack and defense, and you're not ever totally the most broad martial artist you could be. But that 100% is kind of like a goal, a theoretical that you want to, expand your knowledge. If your goal is to be a complete martial artist in unarmed combat and not, just the best you can be at your combat sport, which nothing wrong with that. That's just a different goal than what I'm talking about and than what I have and then what a lot of you have. So my point is, it's better to stop thinking about these martial arts styles as an orthodoxy, as dogmatic. It's better to think, if you want to train and become a complete martial artist and a well-rounded martial artist in unarmed combat, you want to study everything so you're not surprised. You want to have good training methods so that you get in shape and so that you're able to spar and practice. And ultimately what you want is a system and even a mix of systems that make you a broader martial artist, and then you also deepen those skills and deepen that knowledge as well, not just make it broader. Thank you for tuning in to Martial Art Explorations. Remember, think about systems of combat and methods of training. And I know you're on YouTube, so I don't have to ask you to like, subscribe, and share and all that stuff, so you know how to do that.